7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
His arrest after the 90s pop star alluded to President Trump's assassination Saturday during the Women's March in D.C.
Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Madonna yesterday, well, she said the speech was taken wildly out of context. I guess we are not to believe our lying ears. Joining me now, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. Sheriff, great to see you. And your thoughts on this? I mean, we were in Washington, watched these women and men descend on Washington, D.C., but some of the stars, and for the most part, there were exceptions, but for the most part, they were reasonably orderly. And then these stars get up and start talking. Your reaction?
Well, first of all, Lou, it is a great day in America. Donald Trump is our president.
Amen,
as it relates
brother.
to Madonna. As it relates to Madonna, look, she's an aging over-the-hill performer. Doesn't sell music like she used to. Newer generations are looking at new stars, listening to new stars that are coming up. And so she has to resort to political activism to get any attention anymore. She wasn't taken out of context. We all heard it. She did that for shock value. Now she's trying to walk it back. I think she should at least get a visit from either FBI agents or the Secret Service for some questioning to at least send a message to her that that kind of stuff will not go on during the Donald Trump administration, not just his, but any president's administration.
Yeah, I've got to say that we were for a brief time talking to a crowd of LGBT activists down there who were basically, they were menacing, chasing, pursuing whatever, Pat McCrory, the former governor of North Carolina. About 30 of them, and they were loud and they were noisy, but you know, the D.C. police, two officers stepped in after a few minutes and just simply moved them out of the way. So this is me saying thank you to the D.C. police, all the law enforcement officers there, handling a crowd that was, for 2 days, they had large crowds to manage, and it was, for the most part, it was so orderly and so terrific, despite the fact there were arrests, you know, the previous day. But we do want to just say thanks to all the law enforcement, law enforcement officers, my wife and I, and my colleagues here who were on the streets at a time. It was good for the former governor because we got him to shelter, but it was a bad time for us because we got to stand in the middle of a little of the activities. Your thoughts?
Well, I want to give a shout out.
Sure.
Lou, I want to give a shout out to the law enforcement officers during the inauguration, during most of the week in D.C. as well. I was there. They did an exceptional job. It was a joint effort. Pulling off something like that is very difficult to do. They did it during the RNC convention and the DNC convention. They do an admirable job, but I'll tell you what, if those idiots would have come after me like they did the former governor of North Carolina, the cops would have had to move in to pull me off of them.
Well, I have to tell you, I stood up like you would expect me to do, and I asked my my female executive producer, Lila Sabalonis, and my wife, Debbie Dobbs, to go after him and take care of the governor. I'm just kidding. They were both very brave and saved the governor's life. I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I want to turn to where we are right now. There's a tone in the country. I don't care what anybody says, 3, 4 days, whatever you want to mark this as. There's a better tone. There is a lot of positive spirit in the country, and has been since his election. Where do you think we're headed? How important is this to law enforcement, and how do you think that they let me first ask, are you sensing the change, and do you think your colleagues in law enforcement across the country are already responding to a difference in tone and atmosphere?
Sure, and I was excited when I heard Donald Trump during his inaugural address to point out the fact that there's going to be a new respect not only for veterans and for active military personnel, but he also said law enforcement. That's the sort of thing we want to hear, a new narrative for America. Look, the overwhelming majority of law-abiding people in America respect the police, they respect their authority, they do comply with lawful commands, and they know the importance of law enforcement officers. But the Obama administration and the office under him was an echo chamber for the anti-police sentiment. I do believe it will change. I'm sensing this much from the law enforcement officers I've talked to all last week and will continue to talk to. They're sensing it as well, that there's a new sheriff in town, if I can use that phrase. And from there is going to come a new spirit of respect, not just for law enforcement, but authority all across America.
Well, Sheriff, on this broadcast, you can use any word you like. We appreciate it, and any expression you like. Sheriff David Clarke, great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you, Lou.
Breaking news tonight, and it is good news to report. President George H.W. Bush has been moved out of intensive care after a bout with pneumonia. Wife Barbara Bush has been discharged after fighting bronchitis, and she is back at home. A Bush family spokesperson tweeting this new photo out, saying the president and Mrs. and George H.W. Bush thank their fellow Americans and friends from around the world for their prayers and good wishes, both answered as of tonight. Doctors say that Bush 41 could be released from the hospital as early as this coming Friday. Next, President Trump vows to bring back manufacturing to America.
We want to start making our products again. We don't want to bring them in, we want to make them here. And that doesn't mean we don't trade, because we do trade. But we want to make our products here.
Moody's chief economist John Lonsky joins me here next. So how well is the president doing? Mr. Trump is promising tax cuts and a lot less red tape.
Now, what we're doing is we are going to be cutting taxes massively for both the middle class and for companies, and that's massively. We're going to be cutting regulation massively. Now, we're going to have regulation, and it'll be just as strong and just as good and just as protective of the people as the regulation we have right now.
Mr. Trump also said he's working on lowering the corporate tax rate to somewhere between 15 to 20%. Joining me now, Moody's Capital Markets chief economist John Lonsky to assess some of this. He's moving those numbers a little bit, 15 to 20. He said 15. Ryan says 20. We'll see where it ends up. Will that massive tax cut, will it do what he says?
I think it's going to help considerably, and I wouldn't be surprised if indeed that's passed before the end of this year. That's going to happen along with cuts in federal regulation.
Why should it take that long? I mean, this is Trump time we're on. Come on, let's get this thing going.
Right, and
I got 100 days. Let's get some legislation.
Listening to these business leaders, he's not talking about increased regulation or trying to punish the banksters or whatever, and he wants to see what needs to be done in order to grow this economy more rapidly.
Well, less regulation, lower taxes, certainly helpful. Now, what else is needed?
I think what else is needed?
Because we saw that, by the way. We should point out, we're talking empirically here. The early 2000s under George W. Bush with tax cuts, large tax cuts, did not produce the kind of job creation that any economist had proclaimed at that point.
Well, you know, he perhaps needs some assurances from these business leaders that they're going to go ahead and put these tax savings to good work. Okay, increase production capacity where it's feasible, and please don't go ahead and move jobs offshore.
They've also got $2.5 trillion, as he is the only presidential candidate who've been focusing on to repatriate. He also has he has put in focus the impact of these job-killing deals, offshoring of production, the outsourcing of middle-class jobs. That hemorrhage of great American wealth and potential, he's going to stop.
And you know, we have very low rates of resource utilization in the labor market. Capacity utilization, 75%. That's ordinarily associated with a recession.
Me.
There's a lot of upside with which the economy can grow without risking a very high rate of inflation. But the trick is going to be you have to get people to spend. And how do you do that?
You get them some money and some jobs and some certainty and some security. Let's see, that's right. He said, make America safe, make America great again, make America wealthy again. I think he's got a handle on this. What do you think?
I think so, and you have to have confidence in the future. And be patient. It may well happen. That 3 to 4% growth that he talks about may not be out of reach.
Yeah, I was hoping you would say that, because you know what? I'm tired of naysayers. We've had naysayers for 8 years. I want positive thinking here. And you're here because you are not only a positive thinker, but you're a good thinker. Well, you're a great thinker.
Well, that's
John
very
Lasky.
kind of you.
And I wasn't just being kind, I was just being factual. Thanks so much, John.
My
Up
pleasure.
next, foreign policy at the top of President Trump's agenda.
He's met with both Canada and Mexico. I think he's talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, President al-Sisi today. There's a tremendous excitement, I think, in the diplomatic corps and at the world leader level of people who are excited that President Trump and this administration